Today's topic is on theological epistemology, specifically the belief of Christianity and whether or not it's reasonable to believe it. It's time to talk philosophy because this is the right to reason. This theme is a follow-up of my previous topic on logical fallacies, where I laid out reasons an argument could lose its validity. Logic is based on linking assumptions with conclusions. In order to do that, we place arguments into three categories. 1, deduction, 2, abduction, and 3, induction. Deductions find conclusions to follow from given assumptions. Abductions find assumptions from which conclusions follow. And inductions confirm assumptions by showing how their conclusions conform to the observable facts. Get all that? If it seemed like a lot to take all at once, don't worry. Early philosophers figured out a long time ago this stuff can get kind of heavy, so they'd often use allegories to explain their arguments of reasoning so as to make the concepts, easier to follow. An allegory is a kind of story with an underlying message behind it. You'll find Christ often used this method in communication throughout the gospel. He called these parables. You're probably familiar with the prodigal son or the good Samaritan. These are all parables. Same thing, just like allegories. Plato's allegory of the cave is likely the most famous story in philosophy. Plato wrote a book called The Republic back in 360 BCE. He tells the story of Socrates going throughout the city, having conversations with different people, the Socratic method, you've probably heard of it. He's trying to figure out the meaning of true justice, right? While Socrates is talking to a guy named Glaucon, he presents the allegory of the cave, which he tells the story of a group of prisoners that are living inside a cave. They've been there since birth, chained to the wall, unable to move or even turn their necks. All they can do is look straight ahead at the wall in front of them. Above and behind them are captors standing by a blazing fire. These captors will put figurines in front of the fire so as to project the shadow on the wall in front of the prisoners. So all the prisoners will ever know is the stories that the captors are projecting right in front of them, like shadow puppets. That's their whole life. Just sitting there watching these shows. Kind of like my cousin Tom, who just watches TV all day, and I just remembered he never gave me my waffle press back. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. When they eventually the captors get the chains off of them, right? And they let them go and they release them. They're free. But when they turn around, it's like their necks are sore and they can't move very well because they haven't moved their entire life. There's this fire right behind them, so they turn around to look at the fire. It hurts their eyes. They're squinting. They don't like it. They've only known the shadows on the wall their entire lives. They assume anything else they see is fake, right? Because what they've known is the true reality. They've known it their whole life. So they just stay there. Even though the chains are off them, they stay there watching the shadows on the wall. Crazy, right? Well, it gets crazier. One of the prisoners is grabbed and wrestled up the steep cave, up to the surface, where you can't really see because his eyes are not accustomed to light. We'll call this guy Bob. Bob is just sitting in the grass above the cave, looking around. His eyes are kind of starting to adjust. It's hard to move, but he starts to move anyway, painfully. He starts analyzing the surroundings, starts looking at trees and sky and animals, and not, like real animals, not like the shadow animals that he believed in his whole life. Then Bob gets super introspective, like a bad trip. If you ever just smoked way too much and just who am I? That's Bob right now. He's just totally freaking out, right? And he starts thinking about the meaning of life and how everything's changed for him. He starts thinking about his life before, whenever he lived in the cave, and he starts feeling pity for the prisoners, as you probably would too. So even though he's really haunted by the mind control and the kind of mental torture that he went through, he starts to crawl back into the cave. He's going to go save his buddies, right? When he stumbles upon them, his eyes aren't accustomed to the darkness. Just like his eyes weren't accustomed to the light, the true light of, the sun, now his eyes aren't accustomed to the darkness. So he can't really see the shadow puppets real well. Since the cave dwellers are that's their whole life, this is important to them. They really value the shadow stories. They don't have a lot of respect for Bob. They start looking at Bob why can't you do what we can do? You're not good at this world that we live in, He then starts telling them that everything they believe in is false. Their stories are just made up. It's a way for others to control them. Their whole view is pathetic and small and this weird little cave reality they live in. It's not the real reality. They don't like hearing this crap. They're really pissed off. They don't like Bob's rejection of their whole world, so they end up killing Bob. The story of the cave is a lot like leaving a religion. When you're in the religion, it seems like your beliefs are true. Even if you try to confirm with others around you, they're just going to tell you it's true too. So how do we know if we're in the cave or not? Well, there's some good ways and some bad ways to make that determination. See, we're right back to assumptions and conclusions from Plato. Anyway, so here are some bad ways to know if you're in the cave. For starters, personal experience, evidence of design, I know it in my heart, fear of what happens if I don't believe, confirming with those around me, even looking at past stories like the Bible aren't going to tell me if my beliefs are true any more than these methods would have told the prisoners if the shadows were real. So what are some good methods? How about you start with doubt? Skepticism. Be doubtful about everything. Face cognitive dissonance with a sense of comfortability. The prisoner had to be dragged out of the cave, right? A way to understand this analogously to our topic would be that you're not going to change your mind by free will. It's going to require new information. Another method is to allow your eyes time to adjust to the light. Don't force it right away. The fun of life isn't some destination like paradise or heaven. It's the journey of life. Imagine how alive Bob felt right whenever he was observing this new world around him, sitting in the grass. It's also important to believe in yourself with simultaneously questioning things like authority, tradition, culture. Look, it's not your job to believe or not to believe. You can't believe you can fly even if you wanted to. You don't choose to believe something. You're no more able to stop believing in God by choice than you would be able to stop believing that you can't fly. The only possible threat to your belief is the information that changes your mind. However, if the beliefs you hold are true, then there's no new true information that can threaten them, right? So there's no risk. If you're right, you're not taking any chance. Therefore, your resistance to considering that God doesn't exist is because you're afraid. And why wouldn't you be? The scriptures are ripe with passages telling you to fear the Lord. Like this one in Proverbs 19 that says, "The fear of the Lord leads to life, so that one may sleep satisfied, untouched by evil." Or Ecclesiastes 8, where it tells you that it will be well for those who fear God, who fear him openly. But it will not be well for the evil man, and he will not lengthen his days like a shadow, because he does not fear God. And what happens if you don't fear God or accept his gift of love, right? Well, according to Revelation 21, you'll be consigned to a fiery lake of burning sulfur. And Jesus tells us that in Matthew 25 that you'll be eternally punished by a place that he describes before in Matthew 13 as the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Mark 9 tells us that if your hand will lead you to sin, it's better to cut your hand off, because it's better for you to go through life maimed than to have two hands in hell, where the fire never goes out. Quote. These are obvious fear tactics to convince you to commit your life to this particular religion. It's as if Christ himself was standing outside your door, just knocking on it, saying, "Hey, let me in." You say, "Why should I let you in?" And he says, "Because of what I'll do to you if you don't let me in." It's the same thing as like a mob scenario where God is saying, "Hey, nice life you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it." The lack of consideration is the evidence that you deep down know there's something out there that's going to be your last straw. The last time you're going to try to lawyer your way out of having to admit that the things in the Bible are just wrong. There's a lot of wrong stuff, a lot of immoral things, ton of them. Leviticus 25 says, "You may purchase male or female slaves from the foreigners who live among you. You may also purchase the children." That's nice. Exodus 21. God's law clearly lays out a system in which you can cause your slaves to submit to you voluntarily by keeping their wife and children. It also tells you to do, let's say you want to sell your daughter as a sex slave, what you should do. And if you like, she doesn't satisfy her new owner, then you should buy her back. Here's a fun one from the same chapter. "When a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod so hard that the slave dies under his hand, he shall be punished." Kind of jacked up, but, sort of good, right? If, however, I'm still quoting, "the slave survives for a day or two, he is not to be punished, since the slave is his own property." Judges 11 tells us the story of Jephthah, how he made a deal with God that he could win a battle as long as he sacrificed his daughter. Deuteronomy 22 informs us that we should stone a woman in front of her father's doorstep if she isn't a virgin on her wedding day. These passages force you to ignore your own moral agency, your conscience, and defend the Word of God, no matter what you read. Be careful not to feel anger toward those that think differently. They might not have the same values of you, or they might try to change your mind. Remember the prisoners and what they did to Bob? Finally, recognize your cognitive dissonance. That little frustration you feel when something begins to sound right, but you don't like it. It's going to hurt to climb your way out of this cave. All right. I remember, I felt lonely when I got to the surface because, just like I was and you'll be, Bob was the only one that was up there all by himself. I remember hyperventilating and staring up the clouds and yelling and being angry and just hoping somebody was listening. Somebody was looking back at me, and nobody was. There was nobody there. Everything that you do is going to take that kind of courage, that kind of frustration, that kind of pain. Anything you're proud of in your life has required that. When you're going on a brisk run and exercising, your side starts to hurt, and you're just waiting on that second wind, and you just keep going because your health matters to you. When you're trying hard at work, and you got to work harder than the person next to you because you're demanding success for yourself. You stay up late at night studying for that test the next morning. You lose sleep over it. Hell, even as a parent, you sacrifice your time and your money for your kids, and sometimes the bills are piling up, the kids are freaking out, and it's just everything's piling up, and you want to cry. You still cry. You just do it when they're not looking because this is important to you, and you want them to be strong. Or when you love another person, and you love them just so much. You know what I mean? You ever love somebody so much that it just hurts to love them? That's what I'm talking about. That's what this is. That's what this transition is going to take. Just like anything else you've ever been proud of, you're going to have to go through this. And you can do it. And on the surface of this, on the other side, you're going to be sitting there in the grass, realizing this new situation around you, and you're going to feel free. You're not a prisoner. You're not a servant of the Lord. You're not even a servant at all. The chains that you think are on your wrists are in the palm of your hand. And you just got to have the courage to let it go and start climbing. If you enjoyed that, check out my other videos by clicking subscribe. There's also a lot more of the show on our podcast called The Right to Reason. We interview and debate guests, talk about topics just like this one. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and you can look at our website at therighttoreason.com.